Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. It's always great to be here in studio with you. This podcast is a thought-provoking examination on the disappearance of the nuclear family. Our guest, Rands Sperry, above all, is a dedicated family man. And in this show, we devote the entire second half to the value and need for family unity. In this time of vapid individualism, it seems that we have put all our eggs in the what's in it for me basket. So I'm wondering, Paul, what about the what's in it for us basket? Rands Sperry gets very personal about his all-out commitment to his family of 6 children and 10 grandkids. And oh, by the way, Rands Sperry happens to be a high-profile CEO known throughout the country for his business acumen in commercial real estate, managing in excess of $1 billion annually. In addition to that, he also dedicates probably another 15% of his time to philanthropy. How does he do it? Rand reveals all this in a candid conversation. Please enjoy this most important show with Rands Sperry. Rands Sperry, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I want to tell you and our listeners, Rand, that I am so looking forward to today's show because it is going to be a sort of a different take that we dive into in the next chapter with Charlie. And today's show will be a deep dive into what I'm calling the hungry hearts of our listeners. We all long for peace and safety and security and some form of monetary satisfaction. We hear it preached daily. But the question I am asking is, are we looking in the right places to devote our attention to accomplishing these activities? I wonder, is there something that's going on? And you are, I put you into 3 roles, and I know you have several more than that, but I put you in the role of business executive, philanthropist, and devoted family man. We're going to do an integration of those. And so before we take our deep dive into the nuts and bolts of what we will be talking about is the power of the nuclear family, I think it's important to talk briefly about you, Rand. You are, so our audience knows that you do indeed have credibility.
Okay.
You are literally a nationally known commercial real estate business executives, and your company manages in excess of $1 billion in assets annually. Now, in addition to your business, you are deeply immersed in philanthropy, and not just because you have resources and money to give, but also because you add wisdom and valuable management advice, which I have seen on several occasions. And so let's just kind of give a brief background so we can understand that. Now, first, tell me a bit about Sperry Equities and what it's all about, and kind of, if you don't mind divulging a little bit of bragging a little bit for me. I know you're a very humble man and you don't like to do that. Let our audience know who you are business-wise.
Sure. Well, I started, Charlie, in the commercial real estate brokerage, not actually in the acquisition and ownership of real estate on a large scale. So that's kind of how I got my name. And originally, we started the company in 1987, and gosh, that's 34 years ago, but I was 10 years in the business prior to that, and 12 years prior to starting the company. 1975, I bought my first fourplex.
And how old were you at that time? I know we're going to give your age.
20.
You were 20.
I know. I was 20.
You were 20 and you bought your first property?
Yeah, I bought a fourplex all by my own. I didn't borrow the money. I earned the money working a night job after school. And my dad did have to co-sign on the loan at 20, but I was responsible for it, and I did well with it. I think I paid $45,000, sold it for 60, made like $15,000 on it in a year and a half, which was a lot of money back then. And then I kept reinvesting it. Anyway, but I got in the brokerage business and grew that from 7 offices in Southern California and Phoenix to 38 offices across the country through a franchise platform. And we ended up in the top 10 in the country. And in fact, in 2006, which was the high point until the last couple of years, we had hit $12 billion in sales, working with the brokerage community in collaboration with them, selling that much product. So needless to say, we're one of the top 10 brokerage companies. Now, I've since sold out of that one and brought in a new company. I now have 60 offices with about 300 or 400 people, and I'm growing that. And we are soon going to be international with a contract I'm signing in the next couple of weeks. We'll end up with 25 locations outside this country in the next 5 years. So that was my claim to fame. And then about 23 years ago, I started an equities division where we raise money from high net worth individuals, and we buy real estate in 9 different states. That's what I've been doing for the last 40 years.
And that's what I put my $25 of investments into, isn't it?
Yes, you're part of that. Thank you.
No, thank you, because it was highly profitable. So you outlined your successes. What I am curious about, and it will apply to what we're talking about later, where did you find the confidence and the wherewithal as a 20-year-old to invest in real estate and to get involved in business when most kids are thinking about the next party, the next ball game, the next girl or boy they can date? And I'm sure all those things were roaming through your mind at the time, but you nevertheless had the wherewithal to get involved in business. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from going to a public university. I went to the University or Cal State University, Long Beach. And because I was working part-time, but really I was probably working 35 hours a week and loved what I was doing. I worked in an emergency room doing triage. And so in order to stay full-time in college, I had to take some night classes. In the night classes are more mature individuals. You're not hanging out with your frat brothers. You're hanging out with people that are trying to grow both educationally, financially, take care of their families. And there was a lot of talk about real estate. And in fact, that was my minor in business was real estate. And these guys were all hyped up about the market. It's 1975, 76. Things are starting to happen.
Right.
And, or actually 1974. Surrounding myself with those type of individuals got me thinking I can do this. And I really wasn't scared. A lot of people would be scared, but buying that fourplex, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to be a landlord. I thought, this is so cool at 20 years old. And it was only 4 units. I go, that's easy to manage. And it was. And so I just jumped into it and loved it. And, I was financially rewarded. And so I decided, instead of going to law school, that I'm going to just go out and be a broker for a commercial real estate company that focuses at the time on apartment buildings. But I think it was being around a more mature group of people as a result of going, half my classes were at night. So it was more mature group of men and women.
I did an adult learning, finished my bachelor's degree, and there was a popular saying that it is just unfortunate that education is wasted on the young, because they're not so interested in education as they are this college experience.
Right.
And not what they can learn. And it sounds like that's not the approach that you took.
Yeah, I really didn't get the college experience. I went to school. When class was over, I went home or I went to work. And that was really my life. I managed to have a good time on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But, my average girlfriend was 90 to 180 days. And it was either because I just wasn't interested or they weren't interested. and somebody that was just too busy for him. So I managed to straddle both things, but I wasn't very good on the social side.
I'm going to tease again our later conversation, but what role did your parents play in that?
Well, both my parents were together, so until they died. They were very encouraging as far as what I was doing. In fact, it was my dad that was very focused on, he said, son, either become a corporate lawyer or a commercial real estate broker. And I thought that was really interesting. That was really the basis for a lot of this. And it was because he was an avid reader. He got out of high school with his GED because he didn't finish high school when he was young. He finished it when I was a little kid. And so, he didn't have a huge education, but he was very street smart. One of our war heroes from World War II had a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and really fought in that war on the ground in the infantry. So when he got out of that, he finished his education, his high school education, and he was a big influence. And then my mom was, just a stay-at-home mom, and made sure we stayed in line. But she liked to have a good time. Both of them did. It was really an interesting couple because they weren't your typical mom and dad of the 50s and 60s. They were always in for a party and a good time. And when they built their home in early 1960, we had a billiard room, we had a swimming pool, we had a basketball court, all those kind of fun things. They were there to make sure we had a good time. We traveled basically in the United States. We never went to Europe until I was older. So I had a good family unit there, and I had an older brother that was 2 or 3 years older than me, and that. So it's just the two boys and my parents, and they were fun. I wasn't scared of them. They didn't treat me poorly. They were very positive, empathetic. I remember even when I started in the brokerage business back then, you didn't have a cell phone, so I'd give them my home phone number, and if my dad or mom got a phone call from a prospective buyer, they would track me down because they knew time was of the essence on getting these deals done. You want to get right back to these people. And so they were really helpful and supportive of what I was doing.
Yeah, we're going to get into that later, but the supportive family is just, as we're going to, I hope, discover today, is how critical that is. And just before we do that, as I said, you're a business executive, nationally recognized, soon to be internationally recognized. Your company is extremely successful. So you not only have the Sperry side of business, but you are not involved in charity in a light way, in philanthropy in a light way. It's almost as if you have a full-time job in philanthropy.
Well, that's how we met.
That is how we met, and we fortunately agree on many things in the organization, and currently serve on the boards of charitable organizations as an executive board member or an advisory board member. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how many boards, tell me this, how many boards do you serve on either as an executive member or an advisory member? How many do you serve on today? And how many would you guess you have served over your lifetime?
Well, I was prepared to answer the first one, but I don't know about my lifetime. I know this is really ridiculous, but 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm just counting on 5, 6, 7, 8. Right now I'm currently on 9, and I probably another half a dozen prior to that. So probably 15 boards.
First of all, how do you take it working in boards? But then secondly, how do you have time with your business and your family? How do you have time to spend so much? Because what you do, I know for our charity, you're very involved. You're involved in planning and advising, and you just won for Wells of Life. You and your wife, Rosemary, received the award for, it's not Donor of the Year. What was the award for?
Humanitarian.
The Humanitarian Award for the year for the most impact on the organization for the year. How do you find time for that, Rand?
You start young. I was 45, probably, actually my oldest kid was in first grade when I got on the school board of the school he was on. And ultimately, I ended up helping them raise money and then followed him into high school and all the other kids, and ended up 11 years on that board and president of that school board. And, you know, you just take it a day at a time. I'm in the commercial real estate business. I learned very quickly that you hire people to support you in what you do at a much cheaper rate than what you're worth, and things work out when you do that. For example, you know, I realized very early on that I shouldn't be doing work that an assistant can do. We used to call them secretaries or work assistant. I'd hire someone and teach them and train them to do that so I could spend more time with clients. And then as you build the organization, you build under you people that can do the work of what you did do, and then you advance further. And then as I got more or less a good running machine below me, it freed me up to do things in a philanthropic world. But it also, before that, it gave me the time to spend with my kids. And when I say that, I mean the plays, the sports, the going out to dinner, and then traveling with them. All those things I managed to do because I was able to build an organization underneath me that could support me. So I am very grateful for all the people involved in, you know, the Sperry commercial and Sperry equities. They make me look good, and they do, you know, 90% of the lifting. And that gives me the time to get involved in these organizations. So it has to be pretty well thought out to be able to do all that. And here's the interesting thing is that I got on a CEO board when I was only 35 or 36 years old. I qualified similar to Young Presidents Organization. And I learned from the guys that were 15 and 20 years older than me, because I would look at them and they'd be very successful, and yet they were on 4 or 5 boards, and they had time for their kids. And really, you know, they were my mentors. And I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. And I go, I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And now looking back at my life, I managed to duplicate what they've done, and realize that if you look at it on an overall lifetime, it seems like a lot of work. But when you just do it day by day, like I probably, you know, today I had a 1 hour I spent on board stuff, and I probably spend 1 to 2 hours a day. And when you look at it that way, it's not so bad. And that's how you do it. It really is a day at a time, like so many other things. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's so true. But you can do it. You know, if I've given up anything, I've given up probably doing stuff for myself over the years, which was, let's say, going golfing or going out to the bar and hanging out with my buddies, things like that. But I started that at an early age. I gave that up, as you know, in college. I realized there are more important things in life than drinking and partying every night. And so I'm glad. I look back and I realized really what I really wanted was a family. And I wanted to spend time with that family and enjoy that family. So if I make enough money before I get married and I'm on my way, I can do that. And, you know, I don't know if I've mentioned this, Charlie, but I had $1 million net worth before I got married. I got married at 28. I made my first million at 26. I had enough passive income to get married. I mean, our first home was a 3,500 square foot home in San Marino. I don't know. That's like the Beverly Hills of the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah.
It truly is. I mean,
that's
today,
kind of Pasadena area, isn't it?
Pardon me?
Isn't that sort of Pasadena-ish?
Yes, it's right below Pasadena. It's the wealthiest community in the San Gabriel Valley, and it really is on par with Beverly Hills. I mean, my house now sells for $800 to $900 a foot. The first house we were in. So, and
that's $800 to $900 a foot that's a lot of money, Rand.
Yeah, that's what my first home. It's worth almost $3 million. But my point is that I did make sure I had financial resources before I got married. And you know, people say, "How did you do it?" Because we haven't mentioned it yet, but you know, we had 6 children, my wife and I, and we raised them. And I had time to travel. I know I've mentioned in the past that we've been to 55 countries and 32 states. Maui every year. I spent, as they were growing up, 5 to 6 weeks of vacation time with the family. but that's because, I had a head start. I didn't get married and live in a small little apartment with my wife when I got married. I had money. I was a lucky 20 in my 20s. I was a lucky kid. I was able to do a lot of business. I was a top broker in my company before I started my own, and I invested the money. I didn't just spend it on wine, women, and song. So I had the ability, and then I managed that throughout the years, and understood the balance. I think we're probably going to talk about the balance of life. I took a lot of seminars. I do encourage people in whatever business they're in. Those motivational seminars, Tony Robbins, some people make fun of them and some people love them. And there's all kinds of guys like that. Zig Ziglar was out there back in the day.
Brandon Bouchard is big today.
Yeah. Yep. And so I would attend those conferences. I'd read those books. Oh my gosh, how helpful that was. If anyone is listening to this podcast, please look up your motivational speakers. Find ones you like. You could put CDs in your car or go in person even, and it's really worth it. And a lot of them talked about having balanced life. So I did learn a lot from all that. So I started to execute that plan of, I really didn't think we were going to have 6 kids though. I mean, that wasn't what I thought was in the cards, but we had the first one and the second one 2 years later. Then about 14 months later, we had twins.
Oh.
So by the time my wife was 26 years old, we had 4 children, and I was only 32. So, gosh, we could have had another 4 or 5, but, we stopped at 6.
True Catholics.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with religion, really. It was about, we were having fun. I look at it today and it seems like it was a lot of work, but it really was a lot of fun. And I tell young parents with young children, enjoy these times. You're going to miss them. You're going to miss the times with your young children as they grow up and get married. And, then there's other types of fun, but you're going to miss this stage. So enjoy it. Don't wish for it to be over.
It was interesting talking to my son a couple nights ago, and he's 28, and he says he has a chance. He's really he's a very good strategic thinker as a catcher, and there are already people talking about that he would be a good manager in baseball. And he says, I just don't want to do it because a manager works harder than a player, and I want a family, and there's no way I can nurture and have a relationship with my family and be working 16 hours a day. It's just not possible. So he says he wants to work on his family and then a second career after his family has reached a certain age. And it sounds like, that's your commitment, that he's just aligned himself with your commitment. And you also said something that really interested me, Rand, and you said it was fun. That's the thing. I think we look at life so obligatory that we think, we're obligated and committed to do this and committed, and it takes it it takes it into a different space. It takes it into a must-do space, and if I don't do it, then shame on me, rather than into commitment for joy and passion. I love what I'm doing. And I think in doing that, some may say you're lucky. I would say it's not luck. It's that you're believed that you set an environment for luck to happen, that you create a lucky, fertile soil for luck to emerge. Does that kind of thought mean anything to you?
Yeah. I mean, to add to that, the fact is that you can't be selfish to execute on this plan. You can't be narcissistic. You can't be, I'm 30 years old and I got to live my life while I'm young and then go out and have a family. That doesn't work, in my opinion. To really have a successful family, you've got to be thinking not just about yourself, but about your family. So, when it comes to even your job, or like, for example, my partner and I, we had an agreement that we wouldn't get on an airplane until our kids were at least in high school. That was really the case. We didn't expand our company for years. We were just Southern California. And then we went to Phoenix, and I go, well, that's a 1-hour flight. I would go to Phoenix, visit with the office, and come home. And no one in the house would know. You could catch like an 8 a.m. flight and be home by 5 or 6. And no one even knew I was in Phoenix that day. So Phoenix was the exception. I would probably go there once a month or twice a month. But we didn't travel. All our ownership of real estate was Southern California. Our brokerage was in Southern California. And so that gave us time to be with our families. And, a lot of guys after work, in fact, you hear, when you're watching television after work, well, let's go out and get a drink. I never did that stuff unless it was for a business purpose. I went home to enjoy my family. And so I've never felt it to be an obligation. I enjoyed that. And I thought that's really why I'm working, because honestly, if I didn't have a family, I already could have what I want, in terms of, I already had been to a situation where I could have a place on the beach and a fancy car and all that. But, without those other people in your life, I don't think that's so much fun. So
Rand, what I want to do is we're going to take a break. Sure. And then I want to come back and I want to spend the rest of our time on the Sperry clan and your love for them and as I've witnessed it, their obvious love for you. So let's take a quick break and we're going to come back and we're going to devote our time to family time. Hi, this is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to the next chapter. And my special guest, Rands Sperry. He's a nationally and coming internationally renowned business executive. He's a very influential philanthropist, but most of all, he's a father, a family man. He's a son. Family is really important, and that's what we want to talk about for the rest of our time. And I think this is going to be the new and interesting information that we're going to offer. Now, Rand, in a minute, I want to talk about your immediate family, kids and grandkids and what all. But first, let's talk about your amazing wife, Rosemary. How does Rosemary influence you and the love that is so prevalent in the Sperry family?
From day one, she's influenced me. For example, when I first met her, I think on our second date, we ended up in a clothing store, a men's clothing store, and she changed my whole wardrobe.
Yeah, and you're a pretty good dresser nowadays.
Yeah. So I can thank that to her because, you can make a bunch of money, but it doesn't mean you know how to dress or act or behave. So she really was good at that stuff. She grew up in a very proper household with a dad who got his MBA from Harvard and was a CPA. And so it was good. It rubbed off on me. And I've been very appreciative of that. But she is also a very positive person and very passionate about, I get to tell you, any little creature that has 2 or 4 legs, she's very loving towards them. And she was very positive in my business world too, because her dad, besides owning a CPA firm, he also had side investments. And so she understood the business world meant you have to go to business meetings, and oftentimes my father-in-law would take his wife. So she understood that she was going to have to be involved in meeting all the people that worked for us and going to events and things. She was a great first lady of the company.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And so she was very, and I would get up there almost every award ceremony we would do when we're honoring all the people, and always thank my wife for her support. She'd roll her eyes like, what did I do? And I don't think she really understood or does understand how important that is. She could have been a very negative person and, why are you signing a loan, and for $5 million? Couldn't that hurt us? And, why are you opening another office? Isn't that risky? That type of stuff. And she wasn't that way at all. I'd say, yeah, we're going to open up an office in La Jolla. Oh, that sounds good. When can I go down and check it out? That she was not a risk adverse type of partner. And so she was very supportive and thought, if I do something, it'll turn out just fine. And so she actually got me to believe that.
Yeah, without that influence, if we're having to fight internally at home about what you're trying to do in business and what you're trying to pursue, the goals and your objectives and your hopes, if you're not in sync with your wife, it's not a pretty picture. Yeah, and one thing I have to tell the audience, I just saw you. That's how we decided to do the podcast this week, is I saw you at one of our favorite restaurants in Tustin, California, Zove's Bistro, and you happened to be there with another individual before your family came, and we were chatting. Rosemary then came with the wife of the man you were with, and 2 children were there, and they kind of sat separately, and within 5 minutes, the children were surrounding Rosemary. Yeah, it's just that Rosemary is the Pied Piper of children, and I think she's a Pied Piper of human beings. Everybody sort of goes to Rosemary, and it is, from my perspective, it is that she's interested in you, she's caring, she's non-judgmental, but she's also candid. She's refreshingly candid and tells you her beliefs, and whether she agrees with you or not, she's not going to condemn you for the beliefs. But she is very candid about where she's at, and she's just, I've always said that my wife is the rock of my foundation in my home. And I don't know if that's true for you, but that feels that way with Rosemary.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you're right. If your spouse is adverse to what you want to do, and I've seen it with real estate brokers in our company, where I could see so much potential, but their wife was so nervous about when the next commission's coming in that, before you know it, they're out of the business. And I'm like, well, based on that marriage, he probably shouldn't be in this business. And vice versa. It's men not wanting their wife in our business because it is a male-dominated business. But I found actually the men are, for the most part, were darn supportive of their wives in the brokerage business too. So, because I'd meet them when we'd have these company events, you'd meet the spouses, and the successful ones, their spouse was extremely supportive. I think it's got to be that way in order to be successful. But you brought up something about she's very candid, and that is what attracted me to her almost immediately. She'll just say what's on her mind, and as you get older, I swear to God, even when we're watching a movie, we were watching a movie last night, and it was. Oh my God, I can't think of the name of it. It took place in Australia in 1951. And so this woman her teeth were really messed up, and she was laughing in the scene. And I'm thinking, gosh, her teeth are shot. And my wife, of course, the next word out of her mouth is, oh my God, look at her teeth. Just stuff like that. And we still laugh because we know what each other's thinking. And we'll say it out loud now. It's like unbelievable how in sync we are on silly stuff. We're not trying to impress people and give them a bunch of BS. She just acts the way she is, and it's very refreshing for me. It's been that way my whole life, and I think when people do meet her, they kind of like that spark and energy, and I've got my own opinion type of person without hopefully offending them.
No, she's found that how to manage that tension, and she's very engaging and very embracing, and I always feel supported by Rosemary, and yet it's not just this, oh, way to go, Charlie, you're a nice guy. There's some depth to it. I feel like there's sincerity because she is candid, because she tells it like it is, that it makes what she has to say even more valuable. Where I want to go now, Rand, I want to talk about the demographics of your basketball team with a reserve player.
Okay.
So explain to my audience what a basketball team with a reserve player is.
Well, of course, that's six children. And they're 10 years apart from the oldest to the youngest. And as I mentioned earlier, 4 of them are within 3 years and 4 months apart. So less than 4 years, we had 4 kids. And so it almost from the beginning, when you think about it, we had children in our lives, and mayhem, I guess, as you could call it. But very controlled and very fun, like I said. I think, Charlie, the thing is, I can take some credit, but really probably 80% of the kids is Rosemary. I mean, she really was involved in their lives and loved having children. And, she kept them happy and always interested in doing stuff. When they come home, sometimes I worked out of the house, they would be singing, and I'd get annoyed because they'd all come in singing whatever song was on the radio as they were coming home from school. And, but that's the way it was when I grew up. My mom was that way. She loved all the songs I loved and would play them as we were in the carpool coming home. And so she was very similar in that sense and having a lot of fun with the kids. Now, I was the one that kept them in line more than her, especially when they got in trouble at school. I was always like pro-teacher, and she was always pro-child. Well, that teacher must have said something. I go, now, Rosemary, we got to listen to what the teacher has to say. Maybe our kids did something wrong. And so it was a good balance. And I think that was important in raising them and that. And then I'd be more flexible in letting them have things than she would. She would get upset when I go buy them trinkets or things.
Trinkets. So we don't want to tell our audience what trinkets are in the Sperry family. Don't think they're little bracelets, made of cloth.
Yeah. So really, it would what you're asking of me, but here's the end result. The end result is these kids all grew up. They found terrific spouses. 4 of them got college education. 2 of them started as entrepreneurs right out of high school, and they're all pretty darn successful and at young ages. And, I knew they would be. You could kind of tell by the time a kid turns 12 or 13 years old that they're where they're heading in life and the maturity level. In fact, as you mentioned, I have scholarships for kids. I actually have 27 scholarships, and a number of them are for young adults, teenagers through college. And I read some of their bios, and I look at them. I go, these kids really have their head on straight. They're very mature for their age. They're going to really do well. And it wasn't all about the grades. It's about extracurricular activities and even how their outlook on life at a young age. And that to me was more impressive than just their GPA. So, and I saw that with my own kids. I knew that this is really going to be, these kids are going to do fine. As long as both Rosemary and I stay on them, make sure they do well in college and graduate and get jobs. And the funny thing is, none of them, I take that back, 2 out of the 6, and they're actually son-in-laws, work for somebody, and the other 4 are entrepreneurs, as well as my daughters. A couple of them are just stay-at-home moms, and one of them has an event planning business for weddings. And of course, not just your ordinary wedding. She's done
quite successful, isn't she?
Weddings.
Yeah. She's
and high-end stuff. So, and she's been on reality television doing a wedding, a whole season of that. And so they all have had markers in their life, things that they've done that. I'm like, wow, good for them.
You know what I want to get to, Rand, is what are the inputs that lead children to that? And as you're explaining your combo package with raising your children with you and Rosemary, and then with Rosemary's love, do you feel that love is much more caught than it is taught, as is family commitment is caught, not taught? You can say all these words, but if you don't demonstrate them in your life, your children are not going to get them. They're just false words.
My God, you hit the nail on the head. It is. You are so right. It isn't about what you say; it's what you do. We've heard that since we were yay high, and it's so true. The example, and they would write me. In fact, next time you're over, Charlie, I'll show you something that I have framed that they gave me for my 50th birthday, and all 6 of them, wrote like a couple of paragraphs about how they felt about me. And
Oh,
It
my
was,
goodness.
you know, it was just, it was all about you teach by example. Even when they were young, when we'd go on a trip or something, if there was a piece of real estate I had to see, they would watch me go there and analyze the property, and I'd talk about it, and we'd get back in the car and go. And it's been a joke for years. Oh yeah, we never went anywhere without stopping to look at some kind of investment property. And so I think the reason why they wanted to be entrepreneurs is they wanted, you know, their dad's life. They go, I like what my dad has done, and I want to be that way. And I never encouraged them like to get into real estate. I mean, they all have done different things, and I wasn't trying to get them in the family business. In fact, none of them are in the family business. My eldest son is in residential, which I don't do, in Newport Beach, and he's one of the top brokers there, and has been very successful, and all on his own. And, you know, all of them have had successful businesses, but it's example. They've seen me do it, and they've seen the business flourish. I don't, you know, and I don't know, maybe they don't understand that businesses can fail, because we've been very lucky over my lifetime they've seen failures though in my life, in my business world, for sure. And so they do understand that, you know, you got to try different things. Some are going to make it and some aren't. And they understand that failure is part of success. And I would teach that to them when things didn't go well, or I got in some type of litigation that wasn't called for, but I had to deal with it. They understood that's part of the world, because they saw me go through it. They understand that there's risk out there, but the reward to them is just far outweighs the risk. So I'm excited about it, and it is all by example. I mean, I would take these kids, by the way, on the philanthropic things we do. I always would drag one of them along with me, or more than one of them, to, you know, handing out food or whatever.
Yeah, Kelly was activity. Your daughter Kelly was in Uganda with me.
Yeah, exactly. That was the ultimate, by the way, dragging my kid to do something with me.
Into rural, a model, you know, who's used to the privileged life out there living in 1-star hotels.
I think that was the most beautiful thing, is that you're right. She's used to, you know, flying first class and being in 5-star hotels. And not just because of me, but because of who she married. And she had no problem getting on that plane and spending that 7 to 10 days. And first thing she would do is pick up those babies. Do you remember that?
My goodness. I mean, the kids loved her. She loved the kids, and the kids loved her. She was just such a joy on that trip.
Yeah. And they weren't like cleanly dressed. I mean, a lot of them, you know, you could smell, you know, sometimes even urine. She didn't care. She just was so in love with those kids and wanted to help every single one of them. And I would think to myself on that trip, what did I do right that she's so good about all this, that she can have a glamorous life walking down the red carpet, which by the way was the week before the trip, and then the next minute she's in Uganda holding this little 1-year-old or 2-year-old with such love, like it was her own child. I just said, what did I do right? It's kind of funny. Sometimes instead of looking at what we did wrong, you've got to analyze, how did I manage to raise somebody like this? And I know, you know, Rosemary is 80% of that, in my opinion. But you need that father in their life. In my opinion, that male figure helps guide these kids. And it gives just enough. It's kind of like baking a cake. If you don't put every single ingredient in there, the cake doesn't taste right.
Yeah.
You know, even if you don't want to give dad 50% credit, that 20 or 30% that they give, if they're the main breadwinner, or vice versa, that other person, you know, somebody's got to raise these children. And sometimes it's a dual job. But whatever it is you give to that is so important and can change that kid's life. And, you know, today it's a challenge. Do you know, Charlie, 1 out of 5 families in Orange County is fatherless? It's a single parent, a single female parent raising those
I'm
kids.
surprised the number is not greater than that. There was a day, let's wrap it up with this, Rand. There was a day in America we call it the Ozzie and Harriet days, or you and I went over the Cleaver days or the Nelson days that many don't remember, but they were shows in the 50s and early 60s where it was, the so-called American dream. But that was a day when the nuclear family was so much more valued than it is today. We live in a culture of change where there is no nuclear family. We move away from our families because of jobs, because of school, a number of reasons. There's just a number of reasons, but the unity of the nuclear family is no longer quite as prevalent. Do you have any ideas as to what you attribute that to?
Yes, I do. The further we move away from religion, and I'm not talking about Catholicism, and not just Christianity, but any type of religion, that whatever your preference is, the more it tears down our society and the nuclear family. And if you look at how many people believed in God 30 or 40 years ago, and I think it was 70 or 80%, and the numbers almost dropped another 20% from that number, I think it drives the nuclear family further apart. I really do believe the more we take faith out of our lives, out of the workplace, out of things that we hold near and dear, that I think it really has hurt the nuclear family. And I would say that is the number one cause of the breakup of the nuclear family, is the lack of belief that there's a God.
My listeners will hear this for the first time, but that is what I am feeling is the focus of the next chapter of the next chapter, and that is a focus not on a particular religion, but on the divinity that created the universe and is within the universe. And that when we align with that, we are aligned with intention. And I think family and nuclear family are in the divine intent of the way we were created. I think that is so important. And I said I wanted to close with that. I just want to give people an idea of how exemplary and unusual your family is. How many, just kind of give me numbers without going into a lot of explanation. How frequently do you gather together as an entire family?
We probably, well, it's hard during the pandemic to say that, but typically at least twice a month. Like what you would experience typically at a Christmas holiday, that type of event, we'd experience at least twice a month. But because there's 6 kids, there's always 2 to 3 that are here almost daily. Like when I walked in, I had grandchildren from 3 different families as I walked in the door. And that's why I'm hiding in my study here. I think they left now to go home, but that is not uncommon 3 days a week to have some of the grandchildren over. We're very fortunate. All our grandchildren right now live in Orange County. So from Newport Beach to down the street.
Kelly lives in Orange County?
No, Kelly lives in Studio City. But I mean, as far as the grandchildren go, all the grandchildren are local. As far as our children go, I know Kelly right now, she's in Australia. They'll be back the end of the month, and I bet within 24 hours she'll be at our house. She is so starved to see the family. She's never been away for 2 months, and so this is a big deal. And she FaceTimes every day or every evening, because it's Australia, it's morning there, and when it's evening here. And I see all the kids at least once a week, all of them. And so, I mean, who gets to see that? You know, when they're married with their families.
I know.
And typically it's, depending who it is, it's 2 to 3 times a week. So I really am fortunate that investment I made really paid off. And it just, happenstance, because they love the weather here. They didn't want to move out of state, and they managed to bring, because 3 or 4 of the son-in-laws, 3 out of 4 are from other states. They're not here, and they moved here and said, I like it here. And so we were fortunate that our daughters ended up here close to us, and I think they enjoy being part of a big family. None of them have more than 1 or 2 siblings, so the in-laws like being part of this big family. Sometimes it annoys the hell out of them, of course, but I think they.
Of course, and unfortunately, I know families, and it's happened within my family, that family members that annoy the hell out of other families disenfranchise other family members to where the families are just split apart. They won't talk to each other. They have anger and misunderstanding, and it seems that you have been able to have grace and forgiveness come over the top of that. I want to encourage our listeners, too, that you don't have to be a Rands Sperry. You don't have to start this when your kids are, it's easier to start it when your kids are young, but as your kids grow older, the more you grow in love, and I would really emphasize listening and not judgmentalism, accepting where they're at, trying to understand where they're at, understand they're adults, they're on their own, they have their own minds, and that when we respect that, they want to be with us, rather than us lecturing parents, telling them, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. After a while, it's just a repeated message that's noise. It's merely noise. It's not impacting their lives. I'm so about kindness and compassion and love and acceptance. That is what I see in the Sperry family. And Rand, I just want to thank you for taking the time with me today. You are so enlightening, so encouraging. You are one of the finest men that I personally know, and I consider it an honor to call you friend. And
well, thank you, Charlie.
Thank you so much. And I also want to thank all our listeners for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.